I actually learned a lot just listening to you guys. I am a theist, but I am having some doubts. And I've been having doubts. I've been a Christian for about 20 years now. I'm like 40 years old. Gave my life to Christ when I was 20. And, I kind of just went with it,
Take it back. Take it back. No.
Well, as I've been thinking, as I go and I started listening to these stories and stuff, and I started actually thinking about it, it started to not actually make sense. So it's kind of ironic because I was on the internet looking up these things and I came across your show.
Well, that's good. I didn't come across this show, but I came across all the people who did all this work before I ever started. When I was, I spent a lot of years believing but not really being too concerned about it. And when it came time to buckle down and get serious about this, all I really wanted to do was be the best Christian I could be, or be whatever it was God wanted me to be. And
well, that was me. I accepted it and I went with it. I did all I could. But as I started thinking about it, it started bothering me. So I talked to my pastor about it. I go to a big church. There's 1,000 people that go there. I mean, it's pretty huge. And so they got several pastors. And I've gone to them hoping they would give me some really good answers. And the answers they kind of gave me were, they weren't really good in my opinion. Like the one said, well, of course there's a God. Look at creation. Well, I mean,
there's a
natural explanation for that.
Yeah, and I get that. I mean, we laugh because there are people who have literally called the show to say, look at the trees. And I laugh alongside it, but I'm not laughing at that person so much as the absurdity of still dealing with this, because I understand that. I can't put my old theist hat back on as easily as I used to be able to. But I certainly understood, look at the trees. You're living in a world that just seems preposterous that it could have happened without some guidance. I get that, where they're coming from.
Exactly. But I kind of dismissed that one. But the ones that he kind of gave me that kind of stuck with me, it's kind of why I believe it. It's kind of the reason I'm calling is he mentioned prophecies, and he mentioned the apostles seeing Jesus afterwards, and 500 people have seen him. They wouldn't all be wrong.
Who are those? Who are those 500? Because if a book says,
I don't know. He didn't get into that, but he just go ahead. I'm sorry.
If a book says 500 people saw him, and the purpose of the book is to convince you that there's good reason to believe people saw him, we don't have any of those names. We don't have any way of asking them what they did or didn't see. If I went into a courtroom and said 500 people saw John kill this person, and we never called any of them, and I wouldn't tell you who they were, do we get to keep considering that as evidence?
No, that's true. But he just mentioned that kind of in passing. His main focus was you have the 11 minus Judas, because Judas was killed, who went on and continued preaching this under the guise of, if we go out and preach this, we are going to be killed. Now, because they were in hiding.
That is one possibility. I mean, it's not necessarily a done deal that somebody is under the understanding that they're going to be killed or martyred. The thing is, have other people gone out to preach on behalf of other religions with the knowledge that they're going to be persecuted and possibly killed? And if those people went out and did it, then how is it in any way a barometer of whether what they believe is true? I'm willing to accept that it's a barometer on whether or not they were convinced. It's not the perfect barometer of that, because some people may not have been convinced that the story was what we have and that it was true, but they were convinced that the message was important. If you're trying to implement, for example, a social change, and you're trying to enlighten people towards something you've discovered, you're likely to talk about that message because you think it's important, because you think it'll change the world, irrespective of whether or not you think it's the supernatural components are true. And you might think that they're true, irrespective of whether they are true.
It's just so hard for me to give it up, because what if it was true, and the consequences it's bad.
Yeah, it's awful, and it's terrifying for some people. But here's the thing: if it were true, and you were sitting there as a sincere believer, and you were having difficulties, and the people who God has as representatives to answer those questions weren't giving you good answers, and the arguments that they gave you were potentially fallacious, and it wasn't enough to convince you, and you reached out to God and you said, I've believed this for 20 years. I'm confused now. I'm not getting good answers. I'm not sure where I've gone wrong. Please help explain to me why this is reasonable to believe. Why would you write things down in languages that die out and change? Why would you give us books where we don't know the authors? Why would you put us in a universe where eyewitness testimony is unreliable and then expect us to take the word of non-eyewitnesses thousands of years ago on the single most important question? And if you get nothing in response from God, then either that God isn't there or he doesn't care enough to offer a reasonable foundation to support your belief.
And that makes really good sense, and that's kind of what I've been struggling with.
And that's another question. I want to let you get to this, but that's another question. Why would there ever be a God that allowed you to call into some jackass on an atheist show who makes a better argument than the people who are supposed to be there presenting his truth? What?
I know.
None
I don't
of
know
this
why
makes
I'm calling
sense.
the show. I mean, like, I'm calling because I've listened to a couple of your shows, and I'm like, wow, these folks make sense. Like, and like you just said, I talked to these pastors, and they're just giving me, it feels like just smoke, like these smoke screen answers.
Yeah, that's how I got here.
Just keep reading. Yeah, just keep reading your Bible. You'll get the answer. Well, I told him, I was like, Pastor, I've read this Bible. I've read it fully because because of my doubts, I read this book. You doubted. You told me, you're like, hey, like, this is the Word of God. So before last year, I hadn't even read the book.
They got to make up their mind. Is it the book? Is it the books that's important? Or do you actually have a personal relationship with the risen Christ? Is the Holy Spirit actually going to guide you in your life? If you're having difficulties on one and they point to the book, and then when you have difficulties with the book, they point to the other one, how is that not the biggest colossal bait and switch in the history of the world?
Yeah, they just led me to more confusion. And then with the problem, you go to the internet.
And God is not the author of confusion, is what the book says. And yet I can find nothing more confusing than this paradigm that is rooted in this foundation. I'm sorry to keep interrupting you, but having been where you were,
it's your show, so I mean,
this brings up the passions in me because I have been roughly where you were, facing those frustrations, and it's the reason I do what I do. And I'm not saying you're going to be an atheist tomorrow or anything. I'm encouraged that other people are having these questions.
It's driving me nuts. I can't sleep at night. I went to church today, and I just felt like I didn't belong because I'm asking these questions, and all these people around me feel the Spirit, and I don't. And that's what led to more doubt, and I asked these questions. I read the book. I asked him questions. I'm like, this book, it's got a lot of bad things in it. Like, well, why would this be from God? And he said, well, we're fallen people. You just get these, I don't know. So I go on the internet. I try to read about the reliability of the apostles seeing Jesus, and you just get mixed answers from the internet. You get some people that say, oh, absolutely, this is true. He absolutely saw him. And the other people who would say the opposite. So I don't know who to believe.
And I'm going to tell you what you're getting ready to face, and it's one of my biggest pet peeves. I have a handful of pet peeves, but this one is very near the top. I did a debate in Kamloops, British Columbia. It was me and Chris DiCarlo against two ministers, and they said the exact wrong thing at the exact wrong time. Because they said that God will reveal himself to anybody who sincerely seeks God with the right mindset and with the humbleness of heart, etc., blah, blah, blah. And very, very few things are likely to send me off into a rant than trying to pretend that I didn't try hard enough or didn't do it right. That the other people who are still sincere believers, who I was in church with, did anything more. Now, I'm sure there are people who have spent more time in this and studied harder, but there's also people who've never read their Bible, who don't care about any of this, who've never bothered to look into this, who can't think rationally, who don't understand critical thinking, who sit in their churches and are absolutely convinced that they are destined for heaven. They are one of the chosen, the blessed, washed in the blood of the Lamb, and that when I raise questions, it's somehow my fault. How dare you question God? Why can't you come with a humbleness? Screw that. If there is a God and he doesn't care enough to respond given what I did, I don't want anything to do with him. If there are people who are sincere, devout Christians who are trying to do their best to live up to 1 Peter 3:15, to be soul winners, to be an instrument for God on earth, and they begin to have doubts, And the only thing they get is, well, you have fallen in your walk with the Lord. There's some sin in your life that's preventing you from being the instrument that God wants you to be. When that type of bullshit comes out, that is that basically what they're saying is, I cannot possibly be wrong, and God cannot possibly be wrong, and therefore it's you. And as soon as you begin with, I can't possibly be wrong, the conversation is over. And when you blame somebody else in that situation, if it's me, I'm done. I have no interest in carrying on a conversation with somebody who says there's absolutely no possibility I could be wrong, and by the way, it's also your fault that you don't get this. You may, if there's not a way to educate reasonable people to show that Christianity or any other religion is in fact reasonable, then that is still the fault of the God who stuck people in this world, gave them varying degrees of capability at understanding things, set up a system where you have to know things, you have to become an expert in all kinds of things. The absurdity of not being able to just have a conversation with somebody who you actually believe to be real and you want to do what they want, it boggles my mind. And it is, to me, almost concrete evidence that the God that most Christians believe in almost certainly does not exist. And that if there is a God that's even remotely like that, why is that God being quiet about the confusion? Why are there 1,000 or more denominations of Christianity that disagree on every single point of doctrine? Why is there no clarity? Why is it that the Bible can say that God is not the author of confusion, and yet all we see is confusion? And instead, people get together and say, well, you're like me. We both went to the same church. We kind of believe the same thing. Baloney. We saw an advertisement last night for a Christian kink organization going to a swingers club. Now, when I was a Southern Baptist, if I would have heard about that, I would have been appalled. But now it's not surprising, because we know that Baptists don't recognize each other in the liquor stores, and Episcopalians don't recognize each other at the swingers club, and it's all a bunch of hypocrisy. And the idea that the people who are most diligent about studying their religion and most interested in trying to demonstrate to others that this is true and it's needed are the ones that tend to fall out because of critical examination of the Bible in seminaries. The number of atheists coming out of seminary is pretty staggering, and it's why we have things like the Clergy Project. But that was another lengthy rant, Kevin. I apologize for that.
No, it's fine. You pretty much hit the nail on the head with the you fell from God, because my pastor gave me that too. He said, there must be some sin in your life that's keeping you from seeing God, and you just nailed it right on the head. Like,
yeah, there must be some sin in his life that's keeping him from being compassionate to somebody of his flock, to just blame them out of the blue. But
I walked away even more baffled. I went there, I was hoping to get answers, but I don't want to take up too much. But you were very. I appreciate your patience, guys. You guys were awesome. Thank you for taking my call. I mean, I'm going to still ponder this. I don't want to take up too much of your show. I'm going to keep watching, and maybe I'll call back and I'll let you know what happens. I mean,
yeah, please do.
Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate it, and good luck. And no matter where you end up, you are already attempting to pursue this honestly. And so, if you find your way back out of the doubts to where you have a confidence that this is reasonable, I would love to hear you explain why. Because if it's true, I'd like to know. If there's a reasonable foundation for this, I would like to know. And unfortunately, despite debating some of the, despite debating a bunch of apologists who are supposedly great thinkers in this area, it's been incredibly slim pickings as to whether or not there's a decent argument to be made at all.
Yeah, if you haven't heard it yet. I mean, anyways, guys, I want to wish you Merry Christmas, Happy Thanksgiving, Happy New Year.
Same to
you
you.
guys are awesome.
Thanks,
have
Kevin.
a wonderful day. Thank you very much, both.
Kevin.
Bye-bye.
And I was in Buffalo a couple months ago giving a talk for CFI. You can keep an eye on my Facebook page and here, and I'll try to let people know where I'm going. We've hit the 6 o'clock mark. We have hit the wall, and I think Kevin's call is a really good one to end the show on. It's often difficult to watch what's happening in the secular community or in the world in general, or to wake up and realize I found my way out, and for more than a decade I've been doing whatever I can to help others find their way out. And we get lots of email from people who are I used to be this, I used to be that, and now I'm an atheist, or now I'm a skeptic, or now I'm a humanist. And calls like Kevin for somebody who is potentially in a transition phase. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if Kevin called back as an atheist, and I also wouldn't be overwhelmingly surprised if Kevin called back as a theist, because one of the things that we know happens is that religions have protection mechanisms that poison the ability to think rationally about it. They play on people's emotions. What's going to happen after I die? You know, do I have meaning and purpose in my life? How can I possibly be moral if we just don't have a God to dictate what morality is? And one of the things it does is it allows you to make excuses for immoral actions as if they were moral. There's a lot of work to do, and there's no denying that atheists are a minority, that secularists are perhaps a minority as well, although there are plenty of theists who qualify as secularists.
And wherever you end up, don't stop asking questions and don't stop thinking about what it is you're being told.
Yeah, I remember when Jerry DeWitt, who's a good friend of mine and was the first, quote, graduate of the Clergy Project. Basically, the Clergy Project is an anonymous online forum for members of the clergy who no longer believe, so that they can interact with other non-believers. Jerry was the first member of that to come out and be public and give his real name and talk about it in public. And they called him the first graduate of the Clergy Project. He rejected that phrase, and I do too. It may be viewed as as a kind of graduation, but graduation tends to give this idea that we've reached an end point. And merely coming to the conclusion that you don't have reason to believe that there's a God anymore isn't an end point. If anything, it's a starting point. And for the caller who called in to say, what's next? Take that as your starting point and explore the damn world. Enjoy yourself. Try to be decent to other people. If you can't figure out why you should try to be decent to other people, spend some time focusing on whether or not that's a good idea. You have the entire world at your fingertips. And if you get together with other people, and there are countless organizations like the Atheist Community of Austin, both locally and nationally, where you can get together with other people who are non-believers so that you don't feel like you're the only one, because you're not.